Started in products, then went into minor construction. I had some directly from the Fed and then some with the local governments. Well, I got 8A. Why didn't I get no work? Because you don't know what you're doing. Government does business with people. Once they like you, they're gonna be like, we want you because we trust you. There's a lot of opportunity, especially now. Don't spend your days and nights on Sam.Gov. Just do market research. If you put the 100 hours in, you'll get to success. You got everything laid out in front of you and you're just not even trying.
I have Kevin Jennings here today, y'all, also known as Government Cheese, Gov Cheese. And it's a pleasure an honor to have you here today. So welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Awesome. I appreciate you too. So how did you get started in government contracting? There's a lot of areas you could venture into. How did you get into this beautiful space of government contracting?
Yeah, so I got into government contracting myself in 2009. So I was in real estate when I first got out of school. Well, construction, I went to school for civil engineering. I started working to become an engineer. And then while I was working on construction sites, I got introduced to real estate. And this was like in 2005, 2006, back when real estate was really booming here in South Florida. And so then my original businesses were all in real estate. So I had construction companies and a real estate company, a development company, was doing all that type of stuff. And then when the market crashed in 2008, I needed to find a way to generate revenue. So that's how I got reintroduced to government contracting. And I say reintroduced because originally my father was involved in government contracting in the 80s and early 90s. He was like that initial wave of Black contractors that kind of started to pave the way, which was great. And it was also bad, right? Because they were the first ones. So like they took all the bumps. So I tell people like I learned about government contracting from him, but it's not like I was given this great playbook because he was trying to figure it out. So that's how I kind of got introduced to it, was through him. So when the market started to crash in 2008, he kind of told me, he's like, you should really think about like going into government contracting because you need something secure. And I was like, you know what, you're right, because real estate was just so up and down. So that's how I got into it. And I started out doing products, and then I transitioned into doing minor construction, so repair and alteration. And what I would do is I would take my subcontractors that I used to flip houses, and I started having them doing stuff. So my original clients were TSA at Fort Lauderdale Airport, and then I had Coast Guard, so Miami Beach Coast Guard Station. Those were my original two clients. And what I would do is I would have my flooring guy go in there, who was used to doing vinyl flooring in like my Section 8 houses. And then we started doing vinyl flooring in the Coast Guard base. So it was kind of like the same thing. He was doing the same thing, but it was a little bit different. And so that's how I got into it. And then I just progressed from there.
Wow, which is awesome. And especially for those who, may be unfamiliar, as well as those who are in the real estate market, this is an easy pivot. You also mentioned products. What were some of the products you sold?
My first client, like I said, was TSA Fort Lauderdale Airport. And this was early on. So this is when TSA was kind of, I don't want to say just getting started, but TSA didn't start till like 2003, 2002, 2003. So 2009, they were like still trying to figure out what TSA was. So I was able to create relationships in them and provide them products. So I was selling rubber gloves. I was selling the little foot booties that they would, remember back in the day, you have to take your shoes off and then they had the little booties you put on your feet. So I was selling them the little booties, hand sanitizer. It was just real simple things that they just couldn't run out of and get, you know what I'm saying? And that's how I started with products with them. And then that's how I got with the Coast Guard. Was I started looking at all the other agencies that were around that people didn't really know were around. And so Coast Guard has a very, very, very large headquarters here in Miami, in Brickell, actually. And then they have the large Coast Guard base out right behind Miami Metro Zoo. And so I just started networking with them. It was like, that was my initial aim was, hey, I can sell you the supplies that you need. And that's how I started.
I love that. And how did you network? Because often we're told that, you should network. Like, break down, how were you able to network with these different people?
Yeah, so everything that I did in the beginning was like grassroots. So I started with SCORE, right? So I went to SCORE, and like everybody back then, like you had to go sit with a SCORE advisor. That was like the thing to do. And basically, like I started networking there with SCORE, with the SBA. I started going to a lot of the SBA events that they would have. And then I got tapped in locally. So with the local Chamber of Commerce, back then there were still very large presences for like the small and minority business community. There were a lot of local organizations. So I started like grassroots, like going to, as my dad calls it, the cold chicken and pea dinners. Like I was going to all of those different things. And then another big one was the Society of American Military Engineers. So started going to like some of their stuff. So the networking back then, because there was no social media, there was no, like I tell people when I started, not that the internet didn't exist, but the internet didn't exist to what it is today, right? So we had everything that we had to do. We physically had to go do. And so for me, everything was just like every night of the week, I was like, where's everybody at? And I was going to all of that. I was going to all the conferences, the 8A conference, the Disabled Veterans Conference, like every conference that was being held, I was at. I had to get my face out there.
I love your dad saying, and I definitely know that experience well, just going to all these events. And believe it or not, people, there are a ton of government contracting events, and they may have different names, but there are a ton of them. So then you pivoted from products. Then where did you go from there? Like, because you ended up growing, I believe you exited your company. So walk us through that.
Yeah, so we started in products, then went into, like I said, the minor construction. It was just the maintenance, repair, and alteration. So not really building of buildings, but it was the alteration of buildings. So what we used to do a lot of was, like in the VA hospital, when one doctor would move out of a suite, we would go through, paint the walls, change the floors, clean it. Next doctor, change out the lights, change out doors, door handles. So it was a lot of that stuff originally. The small stuff under 25,000, not big ticket items, very small ticket items. And then progressively we grew from there. And then we started to doing regular build construction, then design build work. And then as far as my exit, what I did was in 2014, my dad actually left the company that he was working for and came to work with me and helped me grow. And then around the same time, I pivoted into underground utility construction. And so he was running the facilities construction, and then I opened the underground utilities company. And the underground utilities company is the company that I actually was fortunate enough to sell. So what we started doing was doing work here for the local municipalities with their water and sewer issues. And then I was able to exit that company in 2017.
Did you also have federal contracts providing those services too?
Yeah, we had some, but the thing with underground, with utility and infrastructure work in specific, is what happens is the money comes down from either EPA or DOT, and then it gets to the local government. So with like DOT, the federal Department of Transportation will get the money and then they'll disperse it to each state. So they'll say, okay, Florida DOT, here's money to do these roads that you have. Georgia DOT, here's money to do these roads that are DOT roads. And the same thing happens with water and sewer. The EPA will say, okay, Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer, we're going to give you XYZ to do these projects, and then you got to come up with the rest. So what happens is that the money starts at the federal level when it flows down. So the contracts sometimes are actually given out by the state and local, but they're held to the same federal requirements. So they'll still want you to be hub zone. They'll still want you to have all the different certs as if it was a federal contract, but you're actually getting paid from the local municipalities. So I had a mix of both. I had some directly from the feds and then some with the local governments using federal funded money.
How important has working at the local level been for you?
I mean, for my underground utility business, it's everything, because like I said, a bulk of the work is distributed at the local level. In my facilities construction company, it's hit or miss just because the pricing is so different. So sometimes we'll come down and we'll do local work, but it just has to make sense. But in the utility space and the infrastructure, it's everything, because like I said, all the money comes down locally. I tell all my students, you want to have a good mix. Like everybody said, you have a little bit of both, and then that way you're always straight.
You read my mind. I was just going to ask, what about for your students? Yeah, and I love that. I think the mix is important because there's 50 states. Like I chuckle. I mean, we subcontract on work in amazing Florida. But there, honestly, for all of you watching, there are a plethora of opportunities at the state level, and you don't have to live in the state. Have you seen with your students, is there a particular state, region, or type of state where you're like, man, you really should get in with Indiana, for instance?
To be honest with you, like everywhere is really jumping now. I mean, only jokingly, and it's not for any reason, I always tell people just stay away from California and you'll be okay. But it's only because if you're coming from out of California trying to go into California, sometimes it's hard because you're not set up for California. But I have some students that are based in California and they're doing amazing and they don't want to leave California. So it just really, everywhere's jumping. Of course, naturally, your big states are going to be California, Texas, Florida. Those are going to be your largest states for contracting, not only at the federal, but also at the state level. There's opportunities. Honestly, some of the biggest opportunities that some of my students have found have been in the Midwest, in places where you wouldn't think: Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota. And it's only because nobody typically thinks to go there, right. But they got money too. I have one of my students that landed a major BPA with the Army Corps of Engineers. He lives in Detroit, but his BPA is in Montana because the Army Corps couldn't find anybody who wanted to go to Montana. He was like, I'll go to Montana. I don't care. And So I tell people, don't ever close anything off. Like every state, there's opportunities.
There are. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar, BPA is a blanket purchase agreement. And what's really cool about it is the sky's the limit to the maximum amount for the contract award. So they can add on things. It's really cool, and it can be very lucrative and can pivot into a bunch of other things. So it's great to hone in on those states that people neglect, or they just think they forget, oh, New Mexico. Oh, I thought that was in Mexico. No, it's a state. So there are so many places to explore. So then you pivoted, and then did you continue in kind of business, government contracting? Did you then jump into teaching? Did you go spend every day golfing? What happened?
When I sold my underground utility business, my father took over full everything of our construction business, the facilities construction, and he continued that going. And then I went to work for the private equity firm that bought my utility business, and I worked for them up until November of 2019. So I worked with them for 2 years. And at that point, that's kind of where I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do, because I was like, am I going to just go play golf every day? Do I want to go back into the business with my dad and keep doing that? What do I want to do? Well, then that next year, a couple months later in February, that's when COVID hit, 2020. And so then when COVID hit, I ended up getting back into the utility business. And the reason being is because all of my clients, who are the cities in the state, because they couldn't go to work because of COVID, they were calling me, and my old company wasn't taking on any new clients, but I still had these clients that knew me as Kevin, and they're calling me like, hey, we need XYZ. And I'm like, well, call the company. And they're like, they don't want to take on any more work because of COVID. And they're like, but we really need help. And so for anybody who understands, and this is a big thing for you guys to understand, is that in government contracting, it's your face, it's your name. So they begin to know you, and they're like, and I tell people all the time, the government does business with people, not companies. So once they like you, it don't matter what company name you have, they're gonna be like, we want you because we trust you. And that's essentially what happened. So I ended up getting back into the utility business in 2020 because I wanted to service all of my customers during COVID. But I wasn't really fulfilled. And so in February of 2022, that's when the government cheese was created, because I felt like there was a bigger purpose for me in business, and it wasn't just going out and making more money. I was like, there's got to be something greater. And I found a love and a passion for the teaching and the coaching space, because I feel like, and I'm sure you feel the same way, we've been through so much in the business that somebody's going to go through the same things that I went through. And so I felt like I was doing the world a disservice if I didn't help those that were struggling with the same things that I just went through. And that's been my passion, honestly, going on 2 years now, is just the teaching and coaching space. I love being able to talk to people and help people and give people a cheat code, I guess you could call it, whatever, even though there is no real cheat code. But I love to be able to be that voice.
Since you brought up kind of myths as cheat code, what are at least 3 myths that you're like, oh my gosh, I run across this all the time with students, or that used to... I love it, you roll your eyes. What are some of those myths?
No, you know how I go.
I know, I do, but what are some of those on your end? What are some of those myths?
It was like, one of the biggest ones is people think that they could pay their way to the top. That's like the worst I hate, when people feel like, well, if I do this and pay for this, can I? It's like, no. In this game, in government contracting, you gotta pay your dues. That's it. You can't pay your way to the top. You can't think that you're going to skip the line. You got to put the work in, because that's what the government wants to see. They want to see how much work did you put in to get to this point. Because anybody that just jumps in and just tries to pay their way to the top, the government doesn't trust you. They're like, nah, hold on. So that's one of the biggest ones, is people think they can pay their way to the top. That's not going to happen. You got to put the work in. Same thing that goes along with that is people think it's easy. They think, oh, well, it can't be that hard. I'm like, okay, well, that's if you think so. But there's a reason why there's only 65,000 small businesses that are registered, you know what I'm saying, to do business with the government. Yeah, there's more businesses that are small, but you got to put the work in. It's not easy. You got to jump through the hoops. You have to prove that you're willing to do what it takes. So that's another big thing, is people think it's super easy. And then, I don't know, the last myth is like the one that I hate the most, to be honest with you. I hate when people say that, well, I got XYZ certification, so it should, so I'm gonna get all this work, or I'm a such and such, so I'm gonna be okay. This. It's like, no, that's not gonna do it for you. You have to actually be able to articulate yourself when you open your mouth. Like, don't just think that you can hold up a certification and that the world's gonna fall in your lap. And it happens a lot. We all know, like with 8A. Well, I got 8A. Why didn't I get no work? Because you don't know what you're doing. And that's like the biggest myth that I hate is people think that if they go get a certification, like work's just gonna fall in their lap. Like they don't have to do anything. I'm like, who told you that? That is the biggest lie in the world. Like, no, when you go get that certification, you're honestly gonna have to do more work because now you have to prove that you know what you're doing.
And how to use the certification. That's the other thing. They have no idea how to use it. And then on top of it, I know different services who their intent is to help someone. And these are more of the free services. They may say, well, you need to get this. You need to be woman-owned. You need to be EDWSB. You need to be veteran. And so they think, oh, well, I was told to do it. But also the person sharing this tip doesn't know how to use it. And so it's like, I always say it's like hunting. Just because you have a deer license doesn't mean you're going to open your door and there's a bunch of deer outside your door. It's not how it works.
That's the biggest thing, like, and that's a big pet peeve of mine, is especially like you said with the free services, they'll tell people, well, just go get this cert, because their purpose is to certify people.
Yeah.
So they get graded off of, well, I got so many people certifications. And it's like, okay, that's great, but you didn't teach them how to use the certification. So now an 8A is the worst because it has a time limit. You go get an 8A certification, you've never done anything, 3-4 years pass by before you actually figure out how to do this. And now you've only got a couple years left. And now you're in and out of the program and it's one and done. You can't go back to them and say, hey guys, I messed up. Give me another 5 years so I can try better. It's like, no, you did your 9 years. That's it. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it is. It can be very frustrating. And what are like 3 things that you wish people would stop doing that you notice? What are some of those things that you're like, oh my goodness, if you stop doing this, it's going to help lead to success?
One of the biggest ones is trying to mimic someone else's success.
Oh, that's a good one.
People will look at you and they'll be like, well, Dr. Parks did XYZ, so I'm going to just follow everything that she did and I'm going to be straight. It's like, no, you're not. Like, you can take tidbits of what she did and you can apply that into your life. But I hate when people try to take my success and say, well, how'd you do it? I'm like, well, it doesn't matter how I did it because that was what God had designed for me. Now, you can learn from some of the things that I've been through, but you can't go try to rewrite my entire story as your story. That's not your story. So that's the biggest thing, is that people want to rewrite someone else's story, and that's not realistic. It's not, because at the same rate, especially now, I'm sure you get it, you see it just like I do. You know, we've got the internet and all these people out here, and the internet is nothing but a human highlight reel, right? So it's like people only telling all of their highlights, and then people are consuming the highlights and thinking that that's the life. It's like, no, that's just the highlights. Like that's the good part. Nobody's telling you the bad part. So it's like, you want my story because you want my end, but you don't want my journey. And so I would say that's my biggest thing, is that people are trying to mimic other people's life, but they only are trying to mimic what they see, and that's not realistic. So I don't really have 2 others. That's just my biggest one.
No, I love that, because I always share with people, you have to learn, apply, and adjust. Learn, apply, adjust. You have to do that. And I also know it is definitely highlight reel. Most people don't share their losses. They're not vulnerable. And that's one thing I really pride myself on. I share everything. And I love that, because to your point, because people only share the highlight reels, it seems like, oh, well, this is just like bag of cash or this endless source of honey, or like you press this button and you're just going to get work. And this is the case for large companies and small. They have their ebbs and flows. You had Microsoft protested a win, Amazon won. I mean, you have all of these things going on. It's just that they don't speak so openly about it, but it's part of the entrepreneurial journey. So what keeps you going through all of this? And during COVID, and when, the states are like, hey, we want you to work for us, we love you. What keeps you going?
Honestly, I love the game. I love everything about business. I'm a nerd of the game. So I love to research. I love to understand. I love like everything that comes with it. So that's what keeps me going. It's just the love of the game. It's the love of doing it. And then I also find satisfaction in helping. So whether it be not just helping like students succeed, but also helping my clients, that is the government. When they come to me with a problem and I'm able to give them a solution and they're like, okay, perfect. Wow, this really helped us because this is what we really needed. Like, to me, that's gratifying. I feel like the money is a byproduct of all of that. And I think that's a big problem that people have today, is that their goal is just the financial benefit. And the problem is that if you put the goal being the financial benefit, it's never going to be enough, because if you make 100, you're going to want to make 200. If you make 200, you're going to want to make 500, and you're never going to be satisfied. You're always going to be chasing the money. But for me, I love the gratification that I get when we complete something and we do a task. And so that's what keeps me going, is that gratification, because I'm not chasing more of it. I just am chasing the consistency of it.
And that's what definitely keeps you going, because getting the wins, having the money come in is great, but then there are going to be times when somebody's not winning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if you have a multi-year contract, in my opinion, there's got to be this why that a person is attached to. Even if that why is you want a new roof, you know, you got to have a why. So you're attached to it to help get you through the ebbs and flows of everything. But yeah, I'm there with you. I love having the government as my client. I love all the stuff that we do. I love everything that we're a part of. And the other thing that I think is most humbling about this space is there's a lot that we're involved in, and they may not say, oh, it's because of this subcontractor. And so people must be prepared for that. They're going to highlight the government employees, the military members. They're not going to necessarily highlight us. The SBA may do so. There's a variety of awards. There's a variety of events where they'll highlight small businesses or large businesses. So just be prepared. This is not an ego game at all.
You got to take your ego out of it very early. And that's something else that a pet peeve of mine. I hate the people that come into this with an ego, and they're constantly, well, I, my, we. It's like, man, you going to go back, because at the end of the day, it's not us, it's the government. So you got to be willing to be like, the government did XYZ. Like you said, it's the military workers, it's the employees. Let them have the shine. We are just a supporting staff. We're not the main actor. And when people come into this and they want to be the main actor, they want to be bigger than life, it's like, good luck with that.
Yeah, I think you need to get a job with the government, which is a possibility.
Which is fine too. There's nothing wrong with it.
Nothing wrong. They're one of the few places that have a pension.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it.
It's a beautiful opportunity for those interested. But yeah, it's definitely not, you're not going to be Beyonce, you're not going to be Usher when it comes to this space. What are some things that you wish more people, small business owners, entrepreneurs, would start doing in this space?
I would love to see it get back to, and this is just me being me, but I would love to see more entrepreneurs getting back into the blue collar side of the space. I think that there's nothing wrong with it, but over the past 20 years, we've shifted completely white collar, and I think the blue collar side of the space is neglected. And it's not even just in this, it's just in life in general. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially nowadays, like, everybody wants to be an influencer. Everybody wants to be pretty. Everybody wants to, like you said, everybody wants to be Beyonce's and the Ushers. So I really want entrepreneurs to get back to the blue collar side of it and understand that there's a lot of opportunity, especially now in industries like facilities maintenance, groundskeeping, landscaping, pest control, janitorial services. There's a lot of opportunities because nobody wants to do it. You can make a lot of money being a janitor nowadays. Now, granted, historically, you might not think of that, but in 2024, like, there's a lot of opportunities. I wish that more entrepreneurs would see the value in some of those different industries.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are a lot of opportunities out there, and why not explore those blue collar opportunities? Because as with even white collar opportunities, it's rare that as time goes on, that the business owner is the one doing the work.
Right.
So you're hiring that expert, you're subbing out, you're middleman, whatever, brokering, whatever term you want to use, you're finding those experts to do the thing. And some people may scoff at, like, oh, I would never bid on that. And that's something I learned of recent, because my mentor and many of my mentors in the Orlando area, they were strictly staffing, simulation, modeling and simulation, IT, or a blend, maybe engineering, maybe environmental services. None of them were really involved in anything like Kevin just talked about. So I didn't even know that there were these different types of contracts, that they were so abundant. I remember being at DLME at Patrick Air Force Base and was like, oh, wow, there's these people here to clean. And then I remember this one particular military member was like, why do we have this contract? We have military members here. We can just do this ourselves. And it taught me a valuable lesson about the importance of making sure you're invaluable, because I think they did cut that contract. So I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even know about this. And there are. And at the state level, too, there's so many cleaning contracts that are there.
It's the little things that just go overlooked. And like you say, business owners got to get out of the mindset that, well, I ain't doing that. Well, no, you're not doing that. You're going to eventually hire somebody to do it. Like, that's just life.
No, I love that. I love that. Are there opportunities that you are currently like, man, I'm really interested in, these photography opportunities? I don't know. Is there something that you're interested in personally with your endeavors?
Right now, I'm hyper focused on just infrastructure because that's where one of my businesses was, and that's where a lot of my focus is because there's a lot of opportunity with the infrastructure bill, and a lot of those projects are. It's so funny because like those are projects that literally there's been projects sitting on the books since 2008, 2012 when Obama was around that have just been sitting ready to be released. And so there's a lot of opportunity. There's a backlog of opportunity. And now we're at the point where things that they decided that needed to be fixed in 2008 that weren't fixed, they're starting to fail. It makes them now, this is where the money part of the business comes in, but it makes them now more profitable business ventures because now they're emergencies as opposed to routine. So I'm hyper focused on infrastructure. I'm hyper focused on facilities, like we talked about. I'm hyper focused on that. And then one of the sleepers, I would say, is a whole electric vehicle thing. And it kind of ties into my infrastructure stuff because there's going to be a huge opportunity for electric vehicle charging stations. And so as I go and do work for like DOTs and do stuff on roadways, the next thing that's coming for a lot of roadways is building these charging stations, but not for personal vehicles. Like you have like the Tesla charging stations at like the toll plazas, but like charging stations for highway patrol to charge at, larger charging stations for fire trucks to charge at, for ambulances to charge at, for the tow trucks that, you know, DOT has that tow all. So as we progress into the future and all cars become electric, those larger government vehicles need places to charge. So that's one of the things I'm looking at down the road.
No, and I love that. And for the infrastructure, we're all on the same page. I know, for instance, FAA spends a lot on that, Federal Aviation Administration. Who are some other agencies where you're like, man, they got a bunch of that bill money and they're just looking for vendors?
DOT, so Department of Transportation, all the different sub-agencies of DOT. One of the big ones is Federal Highways and Lands. They have a lot of money. So all the DOT stuff, there is some stuff, EPA, of course. So those are the big ones that I look at. That's where a lot of opportunity is.
I love that. Are you at all concerned that it's about whenever it's an election year or anything political and government contracting?
It's so crazy. Like I tell people, the minute I became a government contractor, my political views kind of went out the window. What I've learned is I've learned how to understand the cycles and just the reality. And sometimes that's a sad reality. And so I tell people like, listen, if it's an election year, XYZ is probably going to happen. It's like, so you just got to know that nothing good is going to happen before an election because both sides are trying to prove, and it don't matter who's there. Whoever's in office is trying to prove that they're the best. Whoever's not in office is trying to prove that the person in office is the worst. So they're not going to vote on certain things. They're not going to let things happen and so it's just, once you understand the politics, you become very unpolitical. And that's kind of the point that I'm at is like, man, I'm not worried about that because no matter what happens, and this is just a sad reality, and you tell me if you agree, it don't matter who's in office, they're still going to need us to work.
Yeah. I mean,
and at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
You know, the thing is, depending on the political affiliation, there are things that you can expect. However, there's always going to be a need for contractors. That's the thing. And the other thing I hear often is like, do you think this space there's too many people in the space? It's saturated. I'm like, no, like it's
not enough.
And too many people give up. And a lot of companies, just because they won doesn't mean they're going to win again, doesn't mean they're going to bid again. It's just, there's not enough.
Do you track the SBA scorecards? Like, do you ever look at them?
I take a look at the scorecards because I'm very well aware of how some of the scoring works. So I'm aware of them, but share with all the amazing people who are watching.
So for me, I look at the scorecards and I say all this to kind of go back to your last statement about, is the industry saturated? So I monitor the scorecards and I just look at the numbers, like how many certified firms are out there. I don't really look at so much the spending part of it. I'm more worried about the numbers, right? And so one thing that I see when I look at the scorecard is that the number of certified firms has been, except for like one or two categories, it's decreasing 3 to 5% consistently year over year. But we all know that the spending is increasing, which it has to, right? So I look at the number of firms going down, the dollar value going up. To me, that's a good and a bad. It's a good for people like us that are in, because now that means that we're going to make more just based off of the pure math. If there's more money going out and less people bidding on it, means the people that are bidding are getting more money. But then the sad thing, and which is kind of one of the fuels to the fire, is that we as Black and brown people in this country have only been able to do this for about 40, 50 years. That's all the opportunity that we had. Women, it's even less, right? And so when you see these numbers going down, at some point, they're going to get to a level where people are going to say, why are we setting aside work for women-owned businesses if every year 5% less women-owned businesses exist? And now we had, 8,000 women, I think it's 12,000 women-owned businesses right now currently in existence. In 5 years, if it keeps going at the same rate, there's going to be 6,000 women-owned businesses. So what are large businesses going to do? They're going to go lobby to the government and say, hey, why are you setting aside all this money for women? There's only 6,000 women. Just give it to us and then we'll find them and we'll help them. We'll make sure that they're taken care of. So now what happens? Now everything that we fought for to get women-owned businesses the right to do business is now gone. And now women are now back beholden to somebody to give them work. Same thing with small businesses. There's only 65,000 small businesses in existence. So what happens when that number gets to 30? They're going to say, why are we setting aside so much money? One of the ones that really pains me is service-disabled veterans. There's only 5,000 registered service-disabled veteran-owned firms in the world, which is crazy to me when everyday vets are coming home and they have no way to generate revenue for themselves. And now in 5 years, that number is going to literally be cut in half. Somebody's going to say, why are we setting aside money for vets? Just, we'll create a XYZ firm and say, well, I'll just create a veteran program and I'll make sure I hire more vets. But now are we really giving them opportunity? So for me, when I read the scorecard, sorry to get off into a tangent.
No, I love this.
But when I interpret the scorecard, I'm looking at the money that's being spent and the goals, but I'm really looking at the number of businesses that are out there. And that's what fuels me every day to run the government cheese is I really want to get this knowledge out to people like, hey, this is an opportunity. But bigger than that, if we don't start showing up, they're going to take this from us. And we're going to be back to where we were 50, 60 years ago. And we've fought too much. Like I look at people like my dad. Like I said, my dad was one of the original 8As back in the 80s. He's one that helped craft the program to what it is today. If I don't get out here and show this and then they take the 8A program away, all the work that him and his peers did in the 80s, it's for nothing. It's gone. You know what I'm saying? And so that's one of my fuels. That's something that really fuels me every day to do what it is that we do.
And adding to that, just to put this in perspective, what has happened is then the government may create a contract vehicle or then emphasize the use of a contract vehicle in order to reach these groups, right? However, the requirement to get on the contract vehicle may be your contracts have to be $1 million and higher. You need to have contracts where you have at least a certain number of FTEs. And even with like PAX 3, the requirement for each contract is $250,000. So then they can say, oh, well, look, we have woman-owned, we have all these categories. However, how many businesses in those categories I was just shared have contracts that are over $250,000 each, that are over $1 million each? Probably not a lot. So then you're now honing in on small businesses who may be doing $40 million a year, $30 million a year, $50 million a year, because they're still deemed small. So that's the fallout, because it's, oh, well, this is how we're going to get a small business, because the numbers are changing. You have small businesses that don't respond to things for whatever reason. It's not to ping anybody in the eye. So then it's, well, let's just use this contract vehicle. We have small businesses on there. They're all approved. But then if you're a small business and maybe the highest contract you've ever received was $200,000, then how are you supposed to even get on this contract vehicle?
The system is definitely, I don't want to say flawed, but skewed, But that's why another thing, like I teach all my students, sources sought. Like I want you guys responding constantly. You got to let them know you exist. Even if nothing happens, we got to let them know that we're here. Because if we just act like we're not here, they're going to do exactly what you said. They're going to go to those contract vehicles and they're going to say, well, we put this out there and the market didn't come back. So let's just go ahead and use this vehicle. And it's just, I don't know. Like I said, I hate to go on a tangent, but that's like one of my big things. That's one of my passions. That's what fuels me to do this business every day.
Yeah. And it's so important because in the grand scheme of things, we're encouraged. Register, pretty much everyone watching, you're a small business, bid on this work, but then sometimes you may wonder, well, why can't I find something? Or it doesn't seem like there's a lot for me. Well, it could be because they went through a contract view, or they went through a large company because they know that they can trust a Boeing and Amazon and they're going to sub it out and meet their small business goals that they have. So it's just a lot of this back end that isn't put out there. And it's important to be aware of it. There's a lot in this space. So what is at least one thing that people should be doing? Definitely sources sought, responding to sources sought. What's another thing that entrepreneurs, business owners, or somebody even just like, oh, wow, I didn't even know about this, that you should be doing out the gate?
Research, market research. Lots of research. Like, don't spend your days and nights on Sam.gov. Spend your days and nights on USA Spending and FPDS. Like, do lots of research, understand the market, understand the game, because this is chess, it's not checkers. So once you can understand the players of this game and you understand the rules of the game, how the game is being played, then you can play the game more effectively. So I tell everybody, just, if you don't do nothing else, just do market research, figure it out. Now, like I said, and when I started in 2009, 2010, the internet wasn't this robust. So we didn't have these types of tools to do market research. We literally had to FOIA everything. We had to hope that something wasn't already archived on FedBizOps. Like, that's the only way you could do stuff. So it was a lot harder. But now you have all these tools at your disposal. Do the work. And that's one of the big things, is do the work. Just put the time in, put the time in, put the 100 hours in. If you put the 100 hours in, you'll get to success. Like, you have to put the time in. And so even if you don't know what you're doing, you can hop on, USAspending.gov, and you can go down a rabbit hole of just clicking buttons and see what happens. Like, that's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing at all. I mean, and what Kevin was referencing was the Freedom of Information Act, of like asking for information, the same Freedom of Information Act that maybe law enforcement might use. So it's like, you going through all these steps to get information was the norm. And now a lot of it's out there. There's so many companies, some for free, some are paid, where you can get different intel. But yeah, that intel is really vital to also make sure you're competitive with your pricing. You're aware of who's winning. I think that's another under leveraged techniques, is search these companies who are winning. If you know all you're bidding on is janitorial, for instance, look up these companies. Look to see who they are, what's the award amount, and do some research. So then you can see, well, what's their business model? Are they just 1099ing this out? Is it that they just have 2 or 3? But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Nah, to piggyback on what you're saying, that's very true. And I teach people as well, use sites like LinkedIn. Like, when you see who your competition and who they're winning, go find them on LinkedIn and then press the who works here button. And then you'll see who, like, that's the thing. Like, nowadays, you gotta really want this. Back when we started, like, you had to really work. Like, it was different. But now you got all these tools. Man, you gotta use these tools, people. You gotta use LinkedIn. Figure out who works there. You know what I'm saying? Look at some of these different things. Figure out, okay, I see that they're winning these types of projects with this one agency, and I know that this agency likes XYZ. Okay, let me figure out how they got that done, or what's their staffing look like. And man, you got to do the work. And now you have all the resources. And so when I see people that are just being lazy, I completely just write them off, because I'm like, listen, I can't even deal with you, because you got everything laid out in front of you and you just not even trying. It's bad. No,
it can be. And it doesn't just apply to government contracting. It's just, across the board. I always bring up gym memberships. There's a lot of people who have a gym membership and very few use them. So, I totally get it. But yeah, there's a lot that you can find out there. And it's just like, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So, Kevin, how can people get in contact with you? I know you have a YouTube channel, but where do you want people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the YouTube is good, and also all social media platforms, Government Cheese, GOV_cheese. They can always email me, kevin@thegovernmentcheese.org. But like I said, I'm just here. I love doing this. I love interacting. I love meeting the people. My passion is government contracting. I don't know, it sounds strange, but I just love, ever since I get into it, I love this game. I love everything about it. I love meeting and interacting with wonderful people like yourself. I love everyone that's in this space. For the most part, everybody is very great to be around, and it's always been that way. So my passion is government contracting.
Now, I love that. So please connect with him, reach out, because it's all about learning, applying, adjusting. Learning, applying, adjusting is truly what it's about. So there's so much out there. There's so much that he has to offer. Check out his content. And I can't thank you enough. It's so exciting because we met several months ago briefly at an event. And I think it's great that we finally get to connect and have this interview.
Nah, thank you. I appreciate you reaching out. This has been fun.
Oh, this has been great. I appreciate you. And everyone watching, don't forget, hit that notification button, the like button. You want to share, you want to get my book, winnerswaybook.com. Don't forget the book, winnerswaybook.com. Don't forget, check that out. And as with everything is possible, and you all are so amazing. Until next time.